Do not be content with showing friendship in words alone. Do not be content with showing friendship in words alone. Let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path. Let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path.
We're here in Beitostølen in Norway at the Norwegian Summer School 2014, learning about the 12 signs of love. The keynote speaker this year is Tom Price, who is the author of a book on this subject and is also a musician. There is a quotation in the Baha'i writings which expresses the theme of this summer school. They whose hearts are warmed by the energizing influence of God's creative love cherish His creatures for His sake and recognize in every human face a sign of His reflected glory. Tom, would you please tell us about your upcoming book and your talks at this summer school?
Yes, the title of the book and the summer school is called The 12 Signs of Love. And really what I wanted to do was define what love actually is in terms of practice. We often talk about love, I love this or I love that, but we don't know what it means. And so I divided love into actions. What can you do to be a loving person? Because sometimes we don't know what love looks like, what it behaves like. And so I divided love into 12 things, and if you can do those things, then you will be a more loving person. So you learn to listen to people, you learn to praise people, you learn to look at the good qualities in people, you learn to try and make people happy, you learn to forgive people when they do things that are not so good to you, and so on. These are the manifestations of love. In other words, love has to have some way of showing itself, and these are the ways you can show love. And in this way we can gradually practice the little things that in total make love. So if you want to be a more loving person to your family, to your mother, your father, your husband, your wife, your workmates, these are things that you can do. Because everyone in the world needs to learn how to love more and more, and this is what the world needs. This is the most important thing everybody needs to learn. So we try to break it down into little manageable actions that each of us can try and do every day. I selected 12 because I like the number 12, and there's 12 months of the year and 12 signs of the zodiac and all kinds of different things. I'm a musician, you know, we have 12 notes that we play. So I thought this was a beautiful way of breaking love down into its small components.
Let your heart burn, let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path. Let your heart burn, let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path.
up to now we have talked about 8 signs of love. So I'm going to ask some of you to tell me what they are. Who can tell me what is the first sign of love? Raise your hand. Somebody raise their hand. Yes, you. What is the first sign of love? I'm sorry? Unity. But there's more to it than unity. What exactly do I mean by the first sign of love? Yes? Yes? Yes, that's important. I mean, unity is the first sign of love, but it's the attitude that unity is more important than anything else. What's the second sign of love? Raise your hand, somebody. Second sign of love. Yes? Acceptance and tolerance. That means that everybody we meet, we accept, we tolerate. In fact, we don't just accept them, we view them as exactly what we need in life. It's like God placed them there exactly because we need that person to help us learn how to love, and we tolerate them. What's the third sign of love? Somebody raised their hand. Yes?
Praise and gratitude.
Praise and gratitude. Learn to praise everybody that you see, and remember that you can't love somebody if you can't praise them. Number 4. Somebody raise their hand. What's the fourth? I see you're looking at notes. Turn your notes away. Don't look at your notes. See if you can do it without your notes. Oh, you can look at your notes a little bit. But tomorrow, you have to take your notes away. 4th. Somebody tell me what the 4th sign of love is. Yes, right there. To see only good in people and completely ignore the bad in people. Yes. 5. What's the 5th sign of love? Raise your hand, somebody. Listening. Okay, you didn't wait till I called on you. You just said it quick. Listening, yes. And that is really a key sign of love, and we've been practicing that. Number 6, the 6th sign of love. What is the 6th sign? Forgiveness. Learning to forgive everybody in life. 7th sign of love. We talked about that one yesterday. Somebody else. Somebody that didn't raise their hand. Over here. A kindly tongue. Speaking kindly to everyone we meet at all times, and resisting the temptation when they speak unkindly to us to speak back unkindly. If they yell at us, to resist the temptation to yell back at them, but always to return whatever they say to us with kindness, a kindly tongue. Is that it? Is that as far as we got? Okay, what's the 8th sign of love? Who else? Somebody hasn't raised their hand yet. Nobody else? Okay, yes. Unconditional love, and love that's selfless, that there's no selfishness, there's no attachment to pride or ego or any motives except that you love them for the sake of God. These are not things that we're here to talk about. We're not here to talk about them. Of course, we are talking about them, but that's not the point. These are things to do. These are things that you have to do. Abdu'l-Baha has said, love is something that has to manifest itself. If it doesn't manifest itself, you don't really love. You know, there's an old saying we say in English, I don't know if you have it in Norwegian. It says, if it looks like a duck, and it quacks like a duck, and it sounds like a duck, and it smells like a duck, then it's a duck. Have you ever heard that saying? It's the saying. It says, if it looks like a duck, and it quacks like a duck, and it smells like, it's a duck. Conversely, if it doesn't look like that, it's not that. And love looks like certain things. You know, you have to say, what does love look like? You may say, well, I love God. You may say, how many of you love God? Okay, you all say you love God. But the point is, if you don't, for example, say your obligatory prayer every day, if you don't trust God, if you don't tolerate God, if you don't try to make God happy, in other words, if you don't do those things, you don't really love God because it doesn't look like a duck. I mean, like a duck, it doesn't look like love. Do you see what I mean? How many of you love your husband or your wife? 1, 2, 3. Oh, that's good. Okay. Okay, just 3 of you love your husband or your wife. That's good. Well, how many of you listen to your husband or wife? How many of you see only the good in your husband or your wife? In other words, you say you love them, but are you doing things? In other words, does it look like a duck? You see, this is what I'm trying to get at. These are things to do, and they're not things to do in general, or I really must get around to doing these things, or if I think about it, I will do them. No, they are things to make it a goal to do today. That's what love is all about. Love is trying to do something today. And so we come to the 9th sign of love, and this is a big one.
Perhaps this is the biggest one. Have you noticed that every time I come to any sign of love, I say it's the really big one? Because really they're all related. You can't do one without the other and so on. But this one I think actually might be the really big one. Okay, and this is service. Service is one of the big signs of love. Learning to be of some assistance or help to every person you meet. If you cannot serve someone, I don't think you can love them. And service is the essential quality that Abdu'l-Baha called upon the Baha'is to practice. For example, he wrote a letter to a woman. And he wrote this letter, and in the beginning he told her generally what she should do, and then he specifically mentioned the things she could do. Let me read the beginning of it, in which he says generally what the women should do. He says, "To live the life, you must be the very kindest woman. You must be the most pure. You must be absolutely truthful and live a perfectly moral life." Now you say, so far so good. How many of you would like to be the very kindest person? You must be most pure, absolutely truthful, and perfectly moral. How many of you would like to do that? Okay, of course you'd like to. But how do you do that? So Abdu'l-Baha then continues and says how to do it. And he lists a whole bunch of things that you can do. What do you think Abdu'l-Baha is going to say you should do? What do you think is the first thing that's going to come out of Abdu'l-Baha's mouth when he says to live a perfectly moral life?
Service.
Okay, but service, what does that mean? Okay, Abdu'l-Baha is very specific. Let's read it. Okay, I'm going to read you the list, and it's interesting what he puts on this list. He continues on. Visit your neighbors when they are sick or in trouble. Visit your neighbors when they are sick or in trouble. That's the first thing he says. That wouldn't have been my first thing. How many of you have neighbors? Anyone have a neighbor? Do they ever get sick? Do they ever get in trouble? Or both? Do they ever get sick or in trouble? Oh, see the service. You see, they're bringing a nice pad. Thank you very much. Okay, this is interesting because this is something everybody can do. Nobody can say, I don't have neighbors and I can't visit them. So this is the first thing he says, visit your neighbors when they are sick or in trouble. And you know, when people are sick and you visit them, they really like it. It's really a good way to heal. In fact, Abdu'l-Baha said that if you go to someone who's sick and visit them with happiness, you are doing more than the doctor. He says, you're achieving more than, I'm sorry, there's a doctor here, there's a doctor, I see two doctors. I'm sorry to tell you this, but Abdu'l-Baha said that when people visit others and make them happy, it's more than the doctor. Not that you shouldn't get rid of doctors, because doctors can also make people happy when they visit them. But this is a very important thing. People get in trouble all the time, isn't that right? So you need to serve them. Now, he says, visit your neighbors when they are sick or in trouble. Offer your services to them. This is a very interesting concept because some of us think that we serve people whenever they ask us for help. If somebody asks for help, then okay, I'll give them help. You know, sometimes we don't like it when they ask for help, but we'll do it. Abdu'l-Baha says, don't wait to be asked. Don't wait to be asked. Offer your services. So you go to someone and you say, can I serve you in any way? Because perhaps you don't know what they need. So you go to someone and say, is there anything you need? Can I help you? In other words, offer your services. This is very interesting because, you know, when Abdu'l-Baha he was persecuted for a long time by the governor of Akka. You know this. He was the governor, he took the keys of the shrine and all kinds of terrible, horrible things. And then finally, when this governor of Akka, who had persecuted Abdu'l-Baha all his life, when he himself ended up losing his position and he was to be banished, Abdu'l-Baha went to comfort him. He visited him when he was in trouble. He did exactly the thing. He didn't wait. The man didn't come to Abdu'l-Baha. Abdu'l-Baha visited him when he was in trouble, even though this man had done all kinds of horrible things. And what was the thing that Abdu'l-Baha did? Do you know what he did? He said, is there anything I can do to help you? He offered his services. And then the man said, well, yes, you can. I'm going to be sent away. What's going to happen with my wife and my family? And Abdu'l-Baha said, don't worry, I will look after them, I will care for them, I'll give them some money and arrange for them to be sent on to you. So Abdu'l-Baha did exactly what he said. He visited people when they were in trouble. And he offered their service. He found out what the man needed, and then he did exactly that. And this is exactly what Abdu'l-Baha tells this woman. Visit your neighbors when they are sick or in trouble. Offer your services to them. Try to show them that you are longing to serve them. He says you have to try and show them that you are longing to serve them. In other words, if somebody says, you say to someone, oh, is there anything I can do? And they say, no. You say, okay, good. And you walk away. That's not good enough. You have to show them that you really want to do it, that you're longing to serve them. He continues. He's writing a letter to this lady. I'm glad that I didn't receive this letter from Abdu'l-Baha, because he says, feed the poor. Feed the poor. Divide what you have. Be contented to remain where God hath placed you. In other words, be content. In other words, God has placed you in your life. Right here and now, God placed you in this room. Are you content with that? You happy with that? Tomorrow, wherever you are, God placed you there. And next week and next month. Wherever you are, God placed you there. Isn't that interesting? Yet sometimes we go through life so unhappy with where we are in life. And Abdu'l-Baha says to be a true Baha'i, you have to be happy and content with where God has placed you. Then he says, be faithful in your care of those to whom he has trusted you. Be faithful in your care to those who have trusted you. So basically, Abdu'l-Baha is implying that everybody you meet, God has placed in your care. God is saying, can you do a little bit of my work? Can you look after him or her or him or her? So anybody that you serve, according to Abdu'l-Baha, you're doing a bit of God's work. You're actually doing a bit of God's work. He says, show by your life you have something different, so that all will see and will say, what has this person that I have not? Show the world that in spite of the utmost suffering, poverty, and sickness, you have something which gives you comfort, strength, and peace, and that you are happy, serene, and satisfied with all that is in your life. Then they too will want to possess what you will need. Then they too will want to possess. Let me say that again. Then they too will want what you possess. You see? Isn't it interesting? You're serving people, you're helping them, but they see that and they want to have what you have. Even though you're giving, they want to have what you have. And they will need no further teaching after you tell them what it is. Abdu'l-Baha is saying you don't have to teach anyone the Baha'i faith. You don't have to explain the Bab came in 1844, or this or that, or the 12 principles. All you need to do is show them that you're longing to serve them, and they will see what's in you. And they say, what is that? And once you tell them that you're a Baha'i, he says, no further teaching is required after you tell them what that is. Now this is a fascinating subject. The idea that when you serve, you are becoming like God, according to Abdu'l-Baha. You are becoming like God. You're actually doing God's work. God wants you to serve everybody you meet. So you have to think very carefully, how can I serve whoever it is I want to have a loving relationship with? How can I serve my friends? How can I serve my neighbors? How can I serve my parents? How can I serve my children? How can I serve my husband or wife? Everybody, there's something they need, something that they need help with. You have to think about this. Let me read another statement from Abdu'l-Baha. This time is in Paris Talks. He says, strive that your actions day by day may be beautiful prayers. Now this is interesting because most of us think prayers is something that you speak. You get up in the morning and you speak your prayers. Here Abdu'l-Baha is saying that there's another kind of prayer. And that prayer is the prayer of action. That when you actually act, it is a prayer. He says, turn towards God and seek always to do that which is right and good. And now he lists a whole bunch of things that you should do. A whole bunch of things that you should do that he calls right and good. Let's see what these things are. Let's count them. How many things do you think there are? We'll count them. The first one he says to do is enrich the poor. Enrich the poor. Do you know anybody that's poor? Have you met anybody that's ever met someone that's poor? Yes. So he says, enrich them. This is the first words out of his mouth. Second, he says, raise the fallen. Raise the fallen. Someone who's fallen is someone who's been made low, someone who has been hurt or in some way humiliated in the world. Are there any people that are fallen in your life? Okay, so they need to be raised and you need to do that. That's what he says you need to do. Third, he says, comfort the sorrowful. Comfort the sorrowful. Do you have any friends that are sorrowful? Anyone you know that's sorrowful? People are sorrowful throughout the world. There's all kinds of unhappiness, and at certain times, everybody is sorrowful. Something happens bad to them, this happened that's not good, or that's happened that's not good. And it's your job, when you see someone sorrowful, to comfort them. At any time, any place, you see a sorrowful person, someone who's unhappy, you say, ha ha ha, that's a chance for me to prove I love. I can kick a goal. But all people can bring healing to the sick merely by visiting them and giving them happiness and joy. This has a great effect on anyone who is sick. 5, he says, reassure the fearful. Reassure the fearful. Do you know anyone who's fearful? Who's afraid of something, who is living in some kind of fear for some reason? Do you know anyone like that? Think about that. Your job is to reassure them, according to Abdu'l-Baha. Number 6, he says, rescue the oppressed. Rescue the oppressed. Are there anyone oppressed in Norway? Are there any oppressed peoples in Norway? Tell me who are some oppressed people in Norway or in Sweden or wherever you live. Who are oppressed? Old people. Okay, young people are oppressed and old people. I agree with you. In fact, old people can often be oppressed. That's true. Who else are oppressed? Polish workers are oppressed. People who are suffering from drugs and alcohol. You need to try and any one of these groups of people, and if we kept talking, we could think of more. You are swimming in a sea of people who are sorrowful or in trouble or oppressed. Isn't that right? You have unlimited opportunities to serve these people, to help them. Okay, how many? Is that 6 so far? Number 7, he says, bring hope to the hopeless. Bring hope to the hopeless. Are there people that you know in your life, maybe that you work with or at school or something, or even in your family, that are hopeless? They have no hope. He says we need to bring hope to them. That's 7. Number 8, he says, shelter the destitute. Shelter those that have absolutely nothing. We need to somehow shelter them. These are 8 things he lists as an example of what are actions that become daily prayers. This is his list of daily prayers. We even, some Baha'is, the youth, they sing the song, strive that your actions day by day may become prayers. We sing that song, but what does that mean? We have to go and see what Abdu'l-Baha says that means. I just want to ask here, because I don't know who I'm speaking to. How many of you here in this room are Baha'is? Raise your hand. How many of you are Baha'is? Good. Yeah, okay, so quite a lot of you are Baha'is. I want to read what Abdu'l-Baha continues to say in this passage. He lists these 8 things. These things that you have to do something to help the poor, the fallen, the sorrowful, the sick, the fearful, the oppressed, the hopeless, the destitute. In other words, you have to work to help all those people. And then he says this. He says, this is the work of a true Baha'i. Doing those 8 things is the work of a true Baha'i. And this is expected of him. If we strive to do all this, then we are true Baha'is. But if we neglect it, we are not followers of the light, and we have no right to the name. I'll ask you again, how many people in this room are Baha'is? How come there's not as many hands up now as just a minute ago? Let me read that again. He lists 8 things to do, okay, to work with the fallen, the sorrowful, the sick, the fearful, the oppressed, the hopeless. And he says, this is the work of a true Baha'i, and this is expected of him. If we strive to do all this, then we are true Baha'is. But if we neglect it, we are not followers of the light, and we have no right to the name. God, who sees all hearts, knows how far our lives are in fulfillment of our words. And there he's saying, God knows what you say and what you do. And if you say I'm a Baha'i and you don't do these things, God knows the difference. He can tell the difference. He says, God knows how far our lives are in fulfillment of our words. So this is why he says you need to strive that your actions express love. And your actions express love through service. Now, don't just think that service is something you have to do to a large group of people or to go and work on, in something. Service is something you can do to anybody you see every time you see them. There's not one person that doesn't have something that you can help them with. The only thing you have to do is ask yourself, how can I serve that person? What's the easiest way to know how you can serve a person? What's the easiest way? Like, let's say your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your cousin, what's the easiest way? Yes. Thank you very much. That's the easiest way. To ask them if you could, what can you do to serve them? And this is what Abdu'l Baha said. He said, ask the person. This is, you don't have to guess. You just ask them. In the act of asking alone, you'll find a power will come over you. And of course, if they say, oh, nothing at all, show them that you're longing to serve them, that you really want to. Because maybe you say, is there anything I can do? And they say no. You say, oh, good. And you walk away like that. Sometimes, I don't know if this is a tarot thing, but sometimes we say, is there anything I can do? But we don't want them to say anything. We say, oh, I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do? And they say no, and you feel good, right? And sometimes if I say, is there anything I can do? And they say, yes, there is, you get mad because you didn't really mean it. You just felt that you had to say that. Isn't that right? So you have to go over and above this attitude of just tarofing. Okay, you cannot tarof service. You have to actually do it. And in order to actually do it, you have to show them you're longing to serve them. Now, I want you to think about some people in your life right now. Some people in your life. Think about your husband, your wife, your children, the people you work with. Think about somebody right now and say, what does that person need? What do they need? Are they hopeless? Should I bring them hope? Are they sick? Should I heal them? Do they need some assistance in some way? What are some things you can do that really serve somebody? Think about those people right now. Everybody think about somebody in their life or people. What do they need that you could do to help them? And raise your hand and tell me what you can do. Who's got some suggestions? What can you do to serve that person?
I have a neighbor who just lost his wife, and I think it would be a good idea to invite him more often for dinners, for example.
Okay, so he is probably in the category of sorrowful, or what else? Would he be sorrowful? Would that be what it is? Okay, so sorrowful is one of the 8 groups of people, and so you know he's lost his wife, so you're going to make a special effort to invite him over and so on. Maybe you can find him a new wife. I don't know, I'm not kidding. but you can do something there. In fact, the Bob even said that. He said if somebody is not married, try to help them to get married. He actually said that, believe it or not. So that's good. So you've got one person that you know he's sorrowful, and so you're going to make a special effort. Okay, what's something else you can do for somebody? Yes?
I have a friend, and she has a lot of problems with her family.
Yes. This is a very important principle, that when you know people that are poor, to the extent that you're able to do so, we should try and help the poor. I'm going to read you a statement from Abdu'l Baha, and I want you to see if you can finish it. He says, no deed of man is greater before God than blank. No deed of man is greater before God than blank. What do you think the blank is? What do you think it is? Who thinks it's helping the poor? Just right. Of course, have you heard that before? But Abdu'l Baha said that. He said, no deed of man is greater before God than helping the poor. How would you like to do the greatest of all deeds? Just what he said then. Help the poor. That's the greatest deed. Because God sees the poor. He says, deny not my servant should he ask any of the thing from thee. For his face is my face. Be then abashed before me. So every time you look at someone who's poor, you understand that you are doing the greatest deed of all. So I agree with that. Very good. And what's another way you can serve people? Yes. Practical ways. Things, you're thinking about these people in your life right now. What are actual things that are practical that help them? Yes. Abdu'l-Baha generally did not give to beggars, but he gave to the poor. Like every Friday at the mosque, he would give to the poor. When he was in New York, he went and gave to the poor. Begging is a more complex issue. It's actually prohibited in Baha'is to do so. And we should be careful to give to beggars, but we should look for the poor that are not begging. That would be my opinion. I've been asked this question a few times, and I'm going to do some more research on it and perhaps even write to the House of Justice if I can't get a decent answer on it. But I believe that Baha'is should be careful about supporting some begging. I believe we should be careful about that. But that doesn't prevent us from doing all the other things. There's plenty of people that are poor that are not begging. So don't say, okay, people begging, I'm not going to give it all. Just say, I'm going to give to the poor that are suffering and so on. I would agree with that. Some other things, practical things. I want to know specific things you can do about specific people. In other words, I don't want this general stuff. I want to know what you can do for people in your life. Yes. You can give them food and you can give them clothing. That's true. That's true. Abdu'l-Baha, he always gave everything. You could never give anything to Abdu'l-Baha that he wouldn't just turn around and give it to somebody else. In fact, one believer, they gave a very fine gift to Abdu'l-Baha. I can't remember if it was a coat or a shirt or something. They gave it to Abdu'l-Baha, and Abdu'l-Baha immediately gave it to somebody else. And the other person was very upset. And Abdu'l-Baha said, why? You gave it to me. If he wears it, it's the same as me wearing it. And so that it comforted the believer. Abdu'l-Baha, one time he was walking down the streets of New York, and he saw a man with torn pants. He took his own pants off and gave them to the man, and he had to walk home like this, Abdu'l-Baha gave. So it's true. There are many things you can do apart from giving money. That's very true. I like that. What are some other things you can do to serve people in your life? Yes. And, this is true in life. If you look around any group of people or any room, you should look for the people that are isolated or lonely. You might go to a party and there might be 10 or 12 people and they're all talking, and you look over here and that person is alone. A true Baha'i should be looking at all the people in the room and see those that perhaps are lonely or isolated. Instead of going to the group that's having fun, go to the one that's not and talk to them and try and encourage them. The shy, the people that are in some way being neglected. And you're saying in this school, this person is being neglected or ridiculed, and you see that person, and you try to help them. I think that's wonderful. Remember, though, when you pay the huquq-ullah, you have to do it with joy and radiance. Because if you don't do it with joy and radiance, Baha'u'llah says it won't be acceptable. So if you give to the huquq-ullah, it has to be done with joy and radiance. He says, if you give to the huquq-ullah without joy and radiance, it's not accepted. So you lost twice, because you lost the money, and then you didn't get any benefit from it. So it's really no good to do it without joy and radiance. But this is a general principle. In fact, Baha'u'llah says, you only give 19% of your income. So how much do you get left? 81%. Okay, so it's still a good deal, wouldn't you agree? Because it's all God's money. Whose money is it anyway? It's not yours. So you get to keep 81, and he gets 19. But he says something interesting. He says, if you give that 19, it blesses the other 81 and purifies it. So that way, the 81 you have is pure. You could spend it, have all the fun, eat all the food you want. It's fine. It's purified and blessed because I gave 19. So it's a very good deal, I think, because if, it's not so bad, It's most countries tax more than that,
55%.
Yeah, where? 55 where?
Yeah, in Norway.
Yeah, so God is better than Norway, okay? You see? So I agree with that. But it's not only that. Abdu'l-Baha said that we should try and make and organize efforts to help the poor, he says, to organize efforts to help the poor, and to organize efforts, in other words, to make plans to give our money to charity or to actually organize activities and charitable activities. And this is why Baha'is throughout the world are engaged in all kinds of programs of social and economic development, because this is the work of the true Baha'i. And so you can give to the huquq-ullah, of course, and you can also give to those. But I want to know, I agree with all of these things, and I agree with that. Things you can do in your life tomorrow. What can you do? Who in your community has certain needs? Yes, in the back.
I'll call my mom, because my mom is
getting older, and her body is getting weaker, and she sees that little by little she will no longer be here.
Yes.
And she's looking back in her life, and it's important to her to feel that she was important to someone.
Yes.
And that someone should be me, and I have to give her the confidence that she's important to me.
Yes. I think this is one of the great things. In fact, it's so great that I'm actually going to talk about it a little more tomorrow. But think about all the things your mother served you when you were young. How your mother suffered a lot, to every one of you. They had to wash you every day and plug their nose and feed you and everything for 18 years, sometimes even more. And yet when they get old, do we give them as much love and as much attention and as much service as they can? And sometimes they don't want to bother you, or they think, oh, you've got your life to live. But I agree with you. This is a great way to serve, so much so that I want to talk about it tomorrow. How many of you have mothers that are still alive? Think about how you can serve them. How many of you have fathers that are still alive? Okay, less hands. I don't know what's going on here with the fathers. Okay, but anyway, yes, I absolutely agree with you. What are some other things? What are things that people need? I remember when we were in Sweden, somebody said that they have friends of theirs that have children, and they're so busy looking after their children that they have gone to that person and offered, I'll look after your children sometime. If you want to just go out and do something, I'll babysit your children. And I thought that was very practical. Do you know anybody like that that's very busy with their children? Okay, and you notice that. You say, oh, there's life is spent. You say, well, I'll take your children for one day. I'll be a grandparent, or an aunt or an uncle, even though I'm not. And take your children for a day, and so you can have a little bit of freedom. Okay, and someone said this in Sweden, and I thought, oh, that's very nice. That's really practical. That's not just thinking that service is the poor and the this and that, but just thinking, how can a little thing I can do that can really make a difference in someone's life? Who's got some other examples? Yes. Oh, microphone. Sorry.
I have come in contact with refugees from Syria, and they are in a camp. They are about 200 persons. I have helped them with food, not food, but with clothes and play tools for the children and shoes for the men and women. Now they are longing to get in contact with the Swedish language. So I'm going to continue my study circles in Swedish for them.
Yes, that's wonderful, absolutely wonderful, because what you're doing, what does Abdu'l-Baha, he says, raise the fallen, rescue the oppressed. These people have definitely fallen and they're oppressed. And remember, there's always something that you can do for them. Don't think, oh, well, if I was rich, then I could help. Or if I was, if I had, time or something like that. Don't think that way, that I would only serve if I have the thing. There's something you can do for example, the Syrian refugees. If you don't have money, perhaps you can teach them, as you said, Swedish, if that's what they need. In other words, you may not have money, but you have knowledge of Swedish. You can teach them and so on. In fact, this is a general principle in life, that we never think that I will serve when I have the means to serve. It's like, I'll tell you a story. There's a story of these two men. One was quite intelligent, and one was not so intelligent. Let's say that the one that was not intelligent, his name was, say, Korosh or something like that. I'm just making it up. Okay. And let's say that the one that was intelligent, let's say his name was, say, Tom or something like that. Anyway, there's these two people, and they're talking, and the one says to the other, he says, if you had 2 Rolls Royces or 2 luxury cars, 2 Rolls Royces, would you give one to God? And he says, of course, if I had 2 Rolls Royces, I would give one to God. He says, good, good. He says, well, what if you had 2 mansions, 2 palaces? Would you give one to God? He says, yes, of course. Without hesitation, I would give 1 palace to God. If I had 2, I'd give 1 to God. He says, good, good. He says, now, what if you had 2 goats? What if you had 2 goats? Would you give 1 to God? And he's thinking about it. And he says, He says, I don't understand. He says, well, let me have a few more thoughts about that. And he says, what if you have 2 goats? He says, I have to think longer about that. And he says, I don't understand. If you had 2 Rolls Royces, you'd give one to God. If you had 2 palaces, you'd give one to God. Why do you have to think about this? And he says, because I have 2 goats. You see, and quite often, God is not asking you for what you don't have. He's not asking you for what you can't give. He's asking you, what do you have that you can give? Whatever you have, that's all you have to give. Too often we say, oh, if only I had this much money, then I would give it. Or if I had this much time, I would serve the cause. Or if I had so much knowledge, then I would teach. Or if I had, in other words, always, if I had this, then I would do that. God doesn't want that. God wants to know, what do you have, and give that. And so you can all serve. You can't say, oh, well, if I was rich, I could feed the poor or something like that. You give whatever you can give, whatever you have. And this is a general principle, and that's why I like so much that she says that she's teaching these people, because that's something she has that she can give. And that's wonderful. And I didn't know there were Syrian refugees in this country. So you see, you are surrounded by opportunities to serve. I want to read you an interesting story of one of the greatest Baha'is we know. Her name was Lua Getzinger. Now, Lua Getzinger, we all know, was a great teacher of the faith. She was one of the best teachers. She could speak in great meetings and great assemblies, and she could do very big work, very important things. So she went to Haifa, and she met Abdu'l-Baha, and while she was there, Abdu'l-Baha came up to her and he said he was too busy today to call on a friend of his who was very poor and very sick. Now, of course, if someone is both poor and sick, Abdu'l-Baha loves them because he likes to help the poor, he likes to help the sick. This man was poor and sick, and he said to Lua, he says he was very busy that day and he couldn't call upon this man. So he said he wished Lua to go in his place. And he told her to take food to the sick man and care for him as he had been doing. So Lua got the address of this man and immediately went to his house, and she was very proud of the fact that Abdu'l-Baha had given to her some of his work. She felt really pleased that he had trusted her with some of his own work. But she went there and immediately came back. And she came back, she returned to Abdu'l-Baha and she said, Master, you sent me to a very terrible place. I almost fainted from the awful smell, the dirty rooms, the disgusting condition of that man in his house. I left quickly before I could catch some terrible disease. Sadly and silently, Abdu'l-Baha gazed at her. If she wanted to serve God, he told her, she would have to serve her fellow man. Because in every person she should see the image and likeness of God. Then he told her to go back to the man's house. If the house was dirty, she should clean it. If the man was dirty, she should bathe him. If he was hungry, she should feed him. He asked her not to come back until all this was done. Abdu'l-Baha has done these things many times, he told her, and she should be able to do them once. Okay, you see, this is how she learned. And you know, Lua could have been asked to do many things. He could have asked her to give great speeches or write books or do anything. But this is what the work he wanted her to do. Because he wanted her to learn how to serve her fellow man. And this is really what we need to learn to do. I want to ask you, oh, does anyone else have any way to serve before we go on? Anyone have any other ways? Okay, I just want you to think very carefully. Yeah, oh yes? You know a way to serve?
Just a small, practical and easy way.
When it comes to being generous and helping those who need, I think it's very easy to do this by just not being a collector. I think we all have our processes and rules.
Oh, yes.
All the stuff that we don't use anymore, clothes that is somehow left too small, or...
Very good.
Yeah. Clothes has a tendency to shrink.
Very good. So
to not pile up. It's very practical and easy way.
that's very good. In other words, there might be a lot of things that you're not using in your house. A lot of things that you're not using a lot, and you feel like possessing them makes you feel good. You can give them away. You can give that we can think, who can use this more than I can? That's very good. That's an excellent way to serve. In all kinds of ways, you have opportunities to bring God closer to you. See, I like to think that every time you serve someone, you are bringing God closer to you. This is really the goal in life. You have to view service as something that is drawing God closer to you. I'm going to read this statement that Abdu'l-Baha said. I read it yesterday. He said, Baha'u'llah proclaims in the hidden words, he says, "Thy heart is my home, sanctify it for my descent. Thy spirit is my place of revelation, cleanse it for my manifestation." So Abdu'l-Baha is saying, God can dwell inside you if you purify your heart. And then he says, this is how you do it. Therefore we learn that nearness to God is possible through devotion to Him, through entrance into the kingdom, and service to humanity. You see, service to humanity brings God into your heart, because you are only near to God when you are like God. He says nearness is likeness. So if you think you're far from God, it's because you're not serving other people. And you are near to God when you're serving other people, because you're becoming like God. God is working through you, and now suddenly you're close to God. If you want to be close to God, you need to serve other people, because God is serving other people. God is serving other people. Service draws you near to God. I want you to think very carefully about Abdu'l-Baha. Think about Abdu'l-Baha. During Baha'u'llah's lifetime, Abdu'l-Baha was usually referred to as the Master. The Master. That was the name Baha'u'llah used to call him. And there were other terms. But when Baha'u'llah passed away, Abdu'l-Baha changed his name. And he said, from now on, I want to be called servant. Abdul means servant. Abdu'l-Baha is servant of Baha. He said, that is my name, that is my glory, that's all I wish to be called. Not the master, not any other great term. I want to be called servant. He chose for himself the name servant. And near the end of his life, Abdu'l-Baha was knighted. He was knighted by the British Empire. He's actually Sir Abbas Effendi. Did you know that? But why was Abdu'l-Baha knighted? For what reason was Abdu'l-Baha knighted? Was he knighted for being center of the covenant? Was he knighted for being the head of the Baha'i faith? Was he knighted for traveling throughout the West and speaking about peace? Was he knighted for writing some answered questions? All the things that we think Abdu'l-Baha did. Was he knighted for any of those things? No. He was knighted for his service, for his work helping the poor during the First World War in Palestine. All the things that Abdu'l-Baha did in his life, but the thing that the world saw and recognized and gave him a knighthood was his service. This is very important, because if we try to understand this, we'll realize that all of the things we can do for the faith, the thing that will be most recognized is what we do in service. This is what will be recognized. Abdu'l-Baha was knighted. And you know, the interesting thing is that when you knight someone, you elevate them. It makes them like a sir, it makes them high. But Abdu'l-Baha put himself low, and that's what caused him to be elevated in the eyes of the British Empire. In fact, Abdu'l-Baha said that the lower you put yourself, the higher you become, or the greater you become, because it's like the ocean. He said the reason the ocean is so big is that it's lower than everything else. The ocean is so great because it places itself lower and everything flows unto it. And so Abdu'l-Baha prayed. He said, God, give me your grace so I may serve thy cause and thy servants. And Abdu'l-Baha actually wanted to serve not just the cause. He didn't want to just serve God. He wanted to serve his fellow Baha'is. I have met many Baha'is who say, I love to serve the cause, but don't ask me to serve the other Baha'is. I don't want to have to do that. You know, I'll serve God all I want. But to serve other people, that's hard. That's hard work. But in order to serve God, you have to serve other people, and you have to serve your other Baha'is. In fact, Abdu'l-Baha even said something interesting. He said that every Baha'i should ever be willing to give their life for the other Baha'is. To give their life for the... How many of you are willing to give your life for the Baha'is in your community? Anybody? 2 people? That's all? Fortunately, he didn't say you have to do it. He just said you have to be willing to do it. So let's ask the question again. How many are willing to do it? There's still not very many people. Well, there's a high standard. But Abdu'l-Baha says, he says, make me as dust in the pathway of thy loved ones, and grant that I may offer up my soul for the earth. In other words, he places himself so low, and yet you see he was knighted by the British Empire because they could see this. This is the standard that makes us a true Baha'i. How many of you are faithful to the covenant of God? Raise your hand. Are you? Come on. How many think you're faithful to the covenant? You think you are. How many would like to be faithful to the covenant? How's that? Okay, that's a better question. Okay. Now, there's an interesting passage where Abdu'l-Baha says, he says, should you enter a city, he says, if you enter a city, he says, it must be that the people will look at you and cry out, this man is unquestionably a Baha'i, because his character, his attitude, his behavior is that of the Baha'is. He said, you must get to the station where you just walk into a city, you enter a city, and all the people cry out, this man is unquestionably Baha'i because his behavior and character is like we've been talking about. Okay. Then Abdu'l-Baha says, not until you have reached this station can you be said to have been faithful to the covenant and testament of God. And when I read that, I said, uh-oh, I have gone to many cities in my life. I've traveled all over the world. I've entered hundreds of cities. And so far, not even in one city has anyone cried out, this man is unquestionably a Baha'i, because his behavior, his character, his morals are like that. So I guess I'm not faithful to the covenant testament of God yet. I want to be, but the point is this is the standard. For us to be true Baha'is, we have to serve. We have to serve mankind. We have to learn to do this every day of our lives. We cannot even let a single day go by without serving somebody. In fact, just make it a goal. Today, who can I serve? It doesn't have to be something great and something grand, and I have to go out and feed hundreds of poor people. Just somebody in my life. Can I offer them assistance? Can I, in some way, care for them, in some way give them something they need, help them in something that they're needing help with? And by doing so, I then are learning to love. I can be a serving person. This is probably the number one sign of love. Would you agree? It is now until I get to the next one. But it's definitely a sure sign of love. Now, we have about, what, how many?
15 minutes.
No, a little less than 15 minutes. Would you like me to go on to the next sign of love? Or would you like me to, you want to have any more discussion on service? Or do you want me to yes? Go ahead. Next sign of love? Okay, I'm going to move on to the next sign of love. Oh, you want to say something on service? Go ahead.
I'm going to refer to was giving food to a retarded child in a camp where she was working. Now, the key to that act of service was she did not want anything in return for that act. It was offered in the purity of love and service. So service has to also be close. Do not want anything in return to be recognized for that service. It has to be purity of motive.
Okay, thank you. She's referring to a Baha'i who died but was recovered, had what we call a near-death experience, which we talked about. And this is a very important point because almost everyone, I think everyone actually, according to researchers, who has experienced passing away but been medically revived, has said the same story that we just heard, that they found that nothing was important in their life except acts of love and service and kindness that they showed people, that these were the great things. All of us are going to learn this ourselves. So, I don't have to tell you for too long. Sooner or later, you're going to realize this. You're going to realize that the most important thing in your life is service, is love, is compassion, is kindness. These are the things that are the jewels, the diamonds, the gems that you will realize in the next world. And that is why God is bountiful. That is why God is bountiful. We always say God is the most bountiful. We say that He's the most giving. And then we look in our lives and we see, what has God given me? He doesn't look very bountiful. In fact, He's bountiful because He's giving you opportunities in the world to serve other people. That's the bounty God gave you. He gave you people to serve. He gave you people to help. He gives you horrible, rotten people to love. He gives you those things. That is His bounty. Because His bounty is to give you these things so that you can gain spiritual development and you'll realize the rewards in the next world. So it's very true what she's saying. This woman has written a book, I understand. She's a Baha'i. She's written a book about her experiences, about how she passed away, went to the next world and came back. And she came away with this very same feeling that thousands of others have had, that when they review their life, they find out that love and service and compassion are the most important things they could have done in this life. Is there some other comments? Yes. In the back, right there. Well, there's someone back there, yes, first.
It's a quotation from Abdul-Bahá or someone else.
If a man were to perform every good work, yet failed in the least scruple to be entirely trustworthy and honest, his good works would become as dry and his failure as a soul-consuming fire. If, on the other hand, he should fall short in all his affairs, yet act his trustworthiness and honesty, all his defects would ultimately be righted, all injuries remedied, and all infirmities healed. Our meaning is that in the sight of God, trustworthiness is the bedrock of his faith and the foundation of all virtues and perfections. A man deprived of this quality is destitute of everything. What shall faith and pride be if trustworthiness be lacking? Of what consequence can they be?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so what he's talking about is the quality that when you're promised to do something, which is trustworthy, then you do it. You do what you fulfill. But Abdu'l-Bahá has said that we must be worthy of the trust of people that God places in our care. In other words, trustworthiness has to do with carrying out the commandments of God, as well as carrying out the commandments not the commandments, but the promises to other people. Remember, I said earlier that all the acts of love relate to our relationship to God and to people, and it's the same thing. And we need to be trustworthy with people. In other words, if you promise to do something, you need to do it. But we also need to be trustworthy towards God. And we cannot learn to be trustworthy with other people until we learn to be trustworthy with God. In the same way that we can't learn to praise people until we can praise God. We can't learn to tolerate people until we can tolerate God. We also cannot learn to be trustworthy with other people if we can't be trustworthy with God. And God has said, if you want to be trustworthy with me, you have to carry out my commandments of love and service and compassion. That is being worthy of God's trust. That's being worthy of God's trust. Then we can learn to be worthy of people's trust. And of course, there's nothing worse than people that you can't trust. Isn't that right? There's nothing. Do you know people that you can't trust? It's impossible to deal with them. And this is why Abdu'l-Bahá is making that statement. So thank you very much for bringing up that statement. All of the Baha'i teachings, they're all related to each other. So trustworthiness is definitely related to the act of love. One more, and then I think we'll take a break. Yes. More. One and then two. Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, sometimes, but that's just what I get, because when the research Before I was a Christian, because we don't accept and realize that Jesus said you must be ready. Your things, your riches, and if you want to come to me, come to close the government. And then I realized, the people who needed shelter, and I had a flat in Oslo, and I gave them shelter and showers and food. And when I was away, they stole my things.
They stole your things?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there was kind of story happening after that. So anyhow, maybe I will be the more detached.
Yes.
Got some experience. I have to be more careful to realize when I have so many people that we have to become more people to join together.
Yes.
I hope that any states around the world can have more focus on what can be for the small things. And also I've been helping people that in a way they have become spoiled. It took a long time to realize that because they took it for granted. Somebody has to really
And of course, yes, you would be tempted. I'm glad you pointed it out. That, it's not easy. Everybody would do it, and God would love it. So God says, think not I believe and not be put to the test. Okay? So I say, I believe in God, I love God. He's going to say, well, prove it. Prove it, and I'm going to make it hard. And so, yes, I'm glad you pointed out that it's a test. But this is what God has put us on the world to do. He's put us on the world to see how much we love him and to test him. And of course, it requires wisdom. You're talking about the quality of wisdom in serving someone. Just giving somebody what they ask for and want is not necessarily wisdom. There's a very important principle. Say your little child says, Mommy, I want to eat 20 ice creams. Okay? Or something like that. Give me one more, give me one more. At some stage, you're going to say, no, it's not good for the child, but that's what the child wants. But you can't explain it to the child, perhaps. You can't explain to the child the nature of the digestive system and the assimilation of sugar and, all kinds of things. So the child thinks you're being cruel because you're not giving him one more ice cream, but you're being kind. And this has to do with wisdom, that we have to learn to serve people to give them what they really need, what they most need, not what they imagine they need that's fallacious. And of course, so wisdom is also important. I think you're pointing out that quality. Yes, one more, and then we're going to take a break.
I think this is a great moment that you are sharing the 12 signs of love with us. And today it's Nelson Mandela Day. It's Nelson Mandela Day today.
Say it again.
Nelson Mandela Day today.
Oh, okay, yes.
And he knew how to serve.
Of course. Yes, he knew how to serve. He knew how to love. He certainly knew how to forgive. And he learned how to withstand tests. He suffered a great amount of his life. So in honor of him and in honor of all the people that have suffered, we can understand that we can do this. So thank you for pointing that out. I'm going to move on to is it the 10th now? The 10th sign of love. And before we break, I'm going to tell you what it is. The 10th sign of love is to make people happy, to be the cause of happiness. And one of the easiest ways to make people happy is just to smile at them. So right now, everybody give me the biggest smile you can give. Come on, no, it's not big enough. Come on, bigger smile. Now look to the person on your left and right, give them a smile. Okay? And because we're going to talk about happiness when we come back, I want you all to smile at everybody for the next half hour, and I'll see you all back here. Thank you.
And when the roof gets up
not be content with showing friendship in words alone. Do not be content with showing friendship in words alone. Let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path. Let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path. Let your heart burn, let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path. Do not be content with showing friendship in words alone. Do not be content with showing friendship in words alone. Let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path. Let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path. Let your heart burn, let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path. Let your heart burn, let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path.